A lot of the TikToks you guys have been submitting for TikTok Tuesday are about fat people.
There's nothing wrong with my body. Fat is not a dirty word. If my body tells me something, I will make sure it is heard.
Lots of them.
A lot of times when people are asked, why don't you date fat people, trans people, people of color, whatever, they will say, it's just a preference. I'm just not attracted to them. I can't make myself be attracted to someone I'm just not attracted to. The implication here being that preferences are innate, unchanging, and completely independent of any outside factors or societal norms, and therefore that they are inherently unproblematic.
A ridiculous amount of them, in fact.
You mean to tell me you came on my page body shaming me for being fat? Meanwhile, the only reason you're thin is because cancer's eating away at you? And you said I'm gonna die young? The plot thinnens.
Considering that I already did a video on the fat activism movement years ago, I actually considered just doing a TikTok Tuesday of only fat TikToks. I still might do that, in fact. But you know what? It has been a few years since that video, and I do think there's still some meat on the bone for this topic. When it comes to fat activism and fat phobia, it's one of those intersectional identities that doesn't really fit with the others. Racial activism, you can see the logic. If you're black and you live in a society that is racist towards black people, that's you being oppressed for something that you can't change. Same with being a woman, or being gay, or trans, or disabled. These are all qualities of a person that are out of their control. And it seems immoral to oppress people for something that they didn't choose and can't change. But being fat isn't quite like that. Yes, there's the addiction conversation. Fat people are addicted to food the same way that alcoholics are addicted to booze, or gamblers are addicted to gambling. And the immediate ability most people have to overcome addiction through sheer willpower is limited. But at the same time, it's not an immutable condition. Yeah, maybe a fat person is fat because they were abused and they got addicted as a coping mechanism. Or maybe they had abusive parents that literally made them fat. There is nuance in how much control a fat person might have here and now. But one thing is clear, they sure as hell have more control to not be fat than a black person has to not be black. The fat activist movement got its start with the organization NAAFA, the National Association to Advance Fat People. It's cut from the same cloth as the NAACP, though obviously not nearly as high profile. It was founded in 1969 because the original leader of the organization had a fat wife, and he wanted to promote the idea of accepting fat people in society. Yes, this actually is just a fetish thing for the chubby chasers, as the NAAFA newsletter includes personal ads for people who are into that sort of thing to find each other. Although fat activism presents itself as the body positivity movement, love yourself. Don't internalize society's hate for you as self-hate. Everyone is valid regardless of size. That's not what it's actually about. It's practical complaints, like how it's fat-phobic that fat people have to buy 2 airplane seats, or have to use MRIs meant for zoo animals because they don't fit into the regular one at the hospital. That stuff is annoying, but it's not based in hatred, unless you consider physics to be oppressive, which I'm sure some of them do. However, their ideological position that fat phobia or body shaming is the same type of thing as racism or sexism, that doesn't make any sense, and their own behavior shows it. Consider this article. It's about body shaming, not fat phobia specifically, but the logic applies. Here's a couple who is older, they're now in their mid-40s, and neither of them are as attractive as they were in their early 20s. That's just life, it happens to everybody. But the wife says her husband used to be hot. After the article went viral, she got completely shat on, body shamed by trolls, in her words. And she asked, what happened to body positivity? What happened to it, lady? You didn't really have it for your husband. People shat on Brendan Fraser for playing the role of a fat guy last year. Jennifer Lawrence has had a consistent body-positive public stance for like a decade now, talking about all the body issues in Hollywood. But she turned around and said that it was gross that she had to play a romantic role alongside Christian Bale in 2013's American Hustle, a movie where he got pretty fat to play the part. Lawrence said that she wanted to kiss Batman, not Fat Man. Progressive rag Afro wrote an article about how body positivity is for women, not lazy white guys with dad bods, and how they were culturally appropriating the concept. The rules of body positivity don't seem to apply to men the same way they do to women, and I think it's because of the movement's origins in Chubby Chasers Anonymous. So if fat guys can't get that body positivity clout, what about getting in shape? But you can't do that either because that's considered far right nowadays.
Why do you think mainstream media and the left in general is so focused on labeling fitness and personal health as being radical and far right?
Yes, yes. No doubt. Well, firstly, well done. You're looking pretty far right now. He's in good shape. He's in good shape. I think it's because these people don't like personal responsibility, right? Because look, there's nothing more meritocratic than the gym. Right? Like it's just you, the weights don't care about your race, your gender, your sexuality, your anything, right? They weigh the same thing every single time. It's just you versus them, it's you versus yourself.
The white supremacist origins of exercise. Pandemic fitness trends have gone extreme. White supremacists' latest scheme to valorize violence and hypermasculinity inside the wellness to fascism pipeline. Neo-Nazi fight clubs are fat-shaming men into white nationalism. If you lost weight, don't publicly talk about it. Shut up, Adele. You're oppressing the fats and you're probably a Nazi. Also, if you go down the rabbit hole deep enough, you'll get to the part of the body positivity movement where they explicitly say that losing excess fat is impossible. Now, it's not actually impossible, it's just hard to do. But it's a bitter pill to swallow that at least part of the blame for your health falls on your shoulders, and that fixing the problem is entirely your responsibility. It's a lot easier to simply say that you can't help being fat, and therefore all the negative downstream effects of being fat slot in neatly to the oppressor-oppressed dynamic of intersectionality. This isn't true, of course, but let's take a look at what the world would look like if it were true. If being fat were an immutable condition, like being black or a woman or gay, then the same rules apply. Oppressing somebody for being fat is immoral because they just can't help it. Systemic fat phobia is to blame for all sorts of different outcomes, from social stigma around being fat to normies finding fat people unattractive, and yes, even down to unequal health outcomes. In fact, go deep enough down this rabbit hole and you'll discover that even when fat people make self-destructive choices, it's still society's fault for how they've been conditioned, not them for what they did. Just like how when other minority individuals choose bad options for themselves, it's due to their learned helplessness imprinted on them by the heteronormative white capitalist patriarchy. Oh, and this also explains why they think that getting in shape is the gateway to fascism. Because rather than dismantling the system of oppression, you're working to gain privilege and become the oppressors. Which is, of course, impossible, because privilege is never ever earned, only inherited by birthright, which is fascism. We can keep peeling back this logic onion, though. We've gone from we just want body positivity for different types of bodies, to actually only the oppressed body types, to fatness is an immutable condition and wanting to change it is fascism. But the final layer below it all is the plain, simple hatred of thin people. Every time there's a picture of an attractive woman and some activist says, "You're a pedophile for liking this," that is what's at play here. They equate health with youth because the last time they were in shape was when they were kids. Also, the woman in this picture isn't 12, she's actually 32. More often than not, when a video game or a piece of artwork has a female character with an unrealistic body type, there's a real-life model whose body was scanned, or who did the motion capture, or who was the artist inspiration, or something like that, meaning that the body type was in fact realistic. And all of that screaming about pedophilia is just the last-ditch effort to get you back in line. Don't worry guys, you're not a pedophile for liking thin adult women. This whole video, we've been laughing at these nonsense people and their ridiculous ideas. And you know me, even though I'm a fat guy myself, I'm still gonna laugh when I see somebody who's so obese their foot fat splits their fucking shoes open. But there is a dark side to all of this. People are actually dying from this shit. No, I don't mean specifically from being fat, though that is the final killer. I mean, they're dying from being fat activists. There is a new trend, slow growing, where fat activism has finally infiltrated medicine enough that we're beginning to see some doctors say that they're no longer focusing on weight when determining the cause of a health problem. The American Medical Association put out a statement last June saying that the BMI measuring scale has a problematic history, specifically its use as a racist tool. And this trend has culminated in these people encouraging each other to remain fat or to get fatter.
And I am 100% glorifying obesity, and there's nothing you can do about it.
There are a few words that I don't allow when somebody comes into my house, and healthy is one of them.
To the point that they are now starting to die off.
The science isn't actually as clear-cut as we like to believe, and there's not really quite a consensus yet about the real relationship between weight and health. Obese people and even morbidly obese people have just as good of health, or sometimes even better health, than people who are in the healthy weight ranges.
Yes, the fat activists are dying of being fat. In a way, this is a problem that solves itself, I guess. Meanwhile, the people who don't go down this route, who actually leave the fat activist movement and then get thin, they are shit on relentlessly, just like Adele. A huge fat activist, no pun intended, Gabriela Lascano, spoke about all the problems that came with being fat.
I actually feel kind of guilty for being a part of this movement, and I know it's not my fault or my responsibility to keep other people's health, but being a pioneer in this game, like I literally was one of the first influencers to work with Fashion Nova before they even had a plus size line. So when I say I'm a pioneer, I'm a pioneer. I'm one of the main reasons why we have the plus size fashion industry that we have. And you could argue with anybody, that's the truth. And my point is that I see a lot of fat girls who gained a lot of weight from being caught up in this movement and turning around 5, 6, 7 years later talking about, damn, I let my health go to shit. I got this problem now. I'm 400 pounds. I can't do this. I can't do that. Babe, it's not all it's cracked up to be.
In response, her fan base dogpiled her.
So I already left a comment about this, and I wasn't going to say anything else because my moods are already gathering her. But I gotta say something. Like, I really tend to sit back and mind my business. I'm not minding my business because it's people like her that genuinely make my ass itch to the 10th degree. Y'all only ever want to have conversations about health and wellness when it comes to fat people.
I don't think that y'all really care about other people's health because y'all don't talk about skinny people. Y'all don't talk about, y'all don't, your mindset, you don't have disabled people in your mind. You don't have people that have medical issues. You don't have people that were born that way.
I just saw the video that everyone on body positive TikTok is talking about, and I want to make a very quick point that anyone who talks about fatness being trendy or a trend or cool, don't listen to them. They're not credible. Anyone who says that is honestly delusional because look at how fat phobic and diet centric and just demonized fat people and fatness is in society. Who is saying it's a trend? Who is saying it's trendy? It's demonized everywhere. What's to look forward to? What's cool about it? What's trendy?
All the jokes aside, this is the dark stuff at the core of this topic. If you're fat and you're in these communities, these are your two options. 1, you lose weight, you move on, and you become the public enemy of the movement. 2, you die. That's it. I don't exactly know why I chose to do this video. I just noticed that in my video topics folder, my fat activism file was growing pretty large. Larger than the activists themselves. And I figured, hey, why not? I guess we might as well end off with something that's actually based in reality. A researcher looked into what's actually effective at getting fat people to lose weight. He used a pretty impressive sample size for the study, 61,000 people who all have gym memberships. The participants were all given points for their participation, which translated into Amazon gift cards. That's a lot of Bezos bucks. The first group, the control group, was simply given the Amazon money regardless of their performance. The second group, the baseline group, planned out dates and times that they would work out. They were given points every time they worked out, and they got an automated text message 30 minutes before every scheduled workout. The third group was given all the stuff the baseline group was, but they also tested out other random strategies, 52 of them to be exact. Right off the bat, they found that the baseline group visited the gym slightly more than the control group. This makes sense, small monetary incentive, plus scheduling, plus reminders. But they also found that of all the random strategies tried in the third group, only 4 of them actually managed to help. The first one was giving a person extra points if they missed a workout and then attended the next scheduled one. Secondly, simply paying people more points to go to the gym. Thirdly, regularly feeding the person information stating that working out is normal and most people are doing it. Fourth, participants could choose to begin the day with points and then lose them if they didn't work out instead of gaining points by working out. When participants purposely chose this alternative point distribution method for themselves, it was more effective for them, but not if it was forced on them. Unfortunately, although all 4 of these extra things did help, none of them actually helped all that much. Interestingly enough, though, they also grabbed 301 normal people, 156 professors working in health, and 90 researchers working in applied behavioral science, and asked them all which of the 52 random strategies are likely to work. It turns out that none of them were able to accurately predict what strategies would work and what didn't. So what does all this mean? Well, it seems that making healthy choices is hard, that people tend to not stick to healthy behavioral changes without a solid incentive structure, and that we cannot accurately predict what actually constitutes a solid incentive structure. In other words, we're mostly flying blind on this topic. It really does just seem to be a matter of will. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Does that mean that when the fat activists say that it's not their fault, is that actually true on some level? If their total lack of willpower is actually due to shitty genes or shitty parents, did they choose to be that way? Can we still blame them if their lack of willpower is out of their hands? I mean, the answer is yes, obviously. Even if your upbringing causes you to react in some negative way, it's still negative. It doesn't stop being negative just because you can't stop yourself. But now we're getting into a meta conversation about the nature of free will, and this isn't the video for that. If you're fat, the best thing you can do is fight it. Work out, do cardio, eat right, you all know what to do. There's no hidden science here, not really. Even if you happen to fail, don't let that be an excuse to start a snowballing trend of failure. It's better to fall off a diet for a day than it is to fall off for a week. Something like 95% of people who do lose weight end up putting it all back on in 5 to 10 years. I'm certainly one of those people. I was much fatter in my early 20s than I am now, and I was thinner in my late 20s than I am now too. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're all going to make it. That statistic isn't 95% for a reason. But what other option is there than to try? I mean, die, I guess. It seems to me that the fat activist movement is simply the natural end result of those 95% of people who didn't make it. It's not just that they didn't try hard enough, though they didn't. To them, it has to be somebody else's fault. It has to be society's fault. Because it's too hard for them to look in the mirror and understand that even though they actually did try as hard as they could, they just weren't enough, making the whole fat activist movement a giant coping mechanism. I mean, we all knew that it was, obviously, but now you understand why it is.